Thank you all so much for being here. I'm just going to pass it to Isabel really quickly to go over some logistics, and then we'll get right into the briefing.
Hola, gracias por estar aquí. Me pasó Michael el micrófono para dejarles saber que tenemos interpretación al español. Si quieren escuchar el audio en español, por favor hagan clic en el globito y pongan Spanish. Y por favor, si quieren activar lo que se le llaman los closed captions o subtítulos, hagan clic en CC. Si tienen alguna pregunta, por favor utilicen el botón de Q&A, o pueden ponerlo en el chat. Cualquier cosa, nosotros estaremos interpretando y también traduciendo sus preguntas. Fanny se va a encontrar en el canal de español. Gracias.
Okay, and yeah, so if you do have any questions throughout the briefing that you would like to submit, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom. If you would like closed captioning, you can also do that using the CC icon. And then again, if you do, this is in English, but if you would like interpretation, you can also join the interpretation icon at the bottom as well. And so, yeah, I'm going to pass it off to Ione to start off our grounding, and then we will get straight into it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, this afternoon, sharing your time and space. We'd like to share that HEAL represents collective expertise and reach of the Front and Centered Coalition. It's a recognition of people that have stewarded the land, framing of stewardship of Mother Earth and environmental justice. This is a community to government conversation. We will touch on tribal consultation, though it is an important part of HEAL and environmental justice. Tribes are well equipped and positioned to assess the state's tribal work. Thank you for joining us again this afternoon. Maiko?
Okay, thank you so much, Ione. And yeah, like Ione said, this is a community briefing. We will not touch on tribal consultation, but again, we believe tribes are fully equipped to assess it for themselves. So we're going to get started. Thank you all so much for being in attendance, for choosing to spend an hour out of your afternoon with us. This is our 2024 virtual briefing on HEAL progress, and we're just very excited to have you all here. My name is Michael Patchke, and I am a policy fellow at Front and Centered. I have been helping lead our work in budget analysis, as well as our HEAL advocacy work. Front and Centered is, for those of you who are new to us, we are a statewide coalition of communities of color across the state who work to address environmental justice priorities within their local communities. Our coalition has helped, develop, shepherd, pass the HEAL Act to provide frontline community direction on environmental justice in Washington state government. And since the passage of HEAL Act in 2021, we have been really active in direct state advocacy to ensure that HEAL implementation embodies the vision and priorities that were first established by frontline communities. So the purpose of the briefing and our HEAL advocacy is to really build upon and strengthen community partnership with the state. And we really aim to critique, but also to co-create. So while we're here to tell our truths, to give an overview of our assessment and our recommendations, we're also here to celebrate HEAL and celebrate the people-powered movement that created one of really the most ambitious environmental justice laws in the country. So we want to do the work, and we want to collaborate and make progress with the state. And so that's why we're here today. And we're introducing our 2024 Frontline Report on HEAL Progress. So this is the second iteration of our HEAL Progress Report that monitors the work of state agencies implementing the HEAL Act. So we'll take a few minutes to discuss, the report and its findings. We'll then get a little bit into our the findings of our supplemental budget analysis from earlier this year. And then we'll also devote the latter half of the briefing to a community panel. We have a couple members who are going to be speaking on community collaborative governance. And if we do have time, we'll also address questions that you have for our panelists or for me or other Friends Senate staff. So these are our speakers for today that I wanted to introduce before we get started. We have Camille Gapaya, who is the Community Outreach Organizer of Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, as well as Ione Jones, who is the Executive Director and President of Comstonic. And they are also both in our government accountability work group, and so they have been, with us throughout the development of the report. And we also have Devin Diaz, the Environmental Justice Program Manager at Front and Centered, who will be sharing a little bit about the findings of our supplemental budget analysis. Okay, so since publishing our last progress report in March of last year, agencies have implemented key components of the HEAL Act. And this includes the development and implementation of environmental justice assessment checklists. Agencies also have identified an initial list of programs and grants to apply environmental justice principles to. They also defined overburdened communities within the budget and funding context, and some of them have also defined overburdened communities for other agency activities as well. And then finally, in line with one of our recommendations from the last report, the Governor's Office established the Environmental Justice and HEAL Implementation Coordinator, who is tasked with overseeing and coordinating HEAL implementation across the 8 different agencies who are currently implementing this. We also want to acknowledge that the Office of Financial Management, they also recently published the HEAL dashboard on their website. And the dashboard is meant to, update community on the progress of implementing components of the HEAL Act. So in the report and in our briefing, we will not be providing an assessment on the dashboard and its contents, but in the report, we do discuss a little bit of the planning and development process of agencies. So just wanted to let you know, these are really the main focus of the 2024 report. We do touch on, community engagement as well, but the main focus is on these new updates since our last one. Okay, so our 2024 Frontline report on HEAL progress is a continuation of our first report, and it provides an assessment of the state's HEAL implementation work thus far, again, with a special focus on the last year and a half. And our report and the assessment within the report, it is based on communications with agency staff. They were also asked to complete self-assessments. We also reviewed all of the publicly available documents that we found pertaining to HEAL Act and environmental justice. And then using those, we assessed each HEAL agency's implementation efforts. So the report includes critiques and highlights of the agency's work to, not only showcase the good that the agencies are doing, but areas that we think can be improved. And so at the end of the report, we do provide a list of recommendations, not only to the HEAL agencies, but other involved parties, such as the Governor's Office, the legislature, and the Environmental Justice Council to help support the HEAL agencies and their work. So our goal really is to increase community involvement as Washington prioritizes and implements environmental justice principles. Because we believe it's paramount to the success of HEAL implementation. So the main overarching key findings that we really discuss in the report The first one is meaningful opportunities for participation are pretty few and far between. And transparency and accountability to frontline communities do remain lacking in a lot of decision-making spaces. And, we see this through a lot of, repetitive questions, engaging with the same communities, and really generally limiting community involvement to public comment periods, which tend to be too short for community members to really get a handle of the topic issue at hand before actually being involved in the public comment periods. Some agencies we have found have piloted some promising processes. So that includes, Commerce and Department of Health's Community Advisory Council, which was tasked with reviewing applications for several grant programs that they were administering. And so there were some, great attempts at including communities more in the decision-making spaces, but we definitely see opportunities to really increase and improve those efforts. We also noticed a pretty significant difference in, how community and state agencies view the HEAL Act and the role that state agencies have in really prioritizing environmental justice at the state level. So in our assessment, we really noticed that, there's a difference in how community views the vision and potential of HEAL, and really how the progress is pretty slow. However, on the agency side, they really, they are working with a lot of obstacles and a lot of barriers, and they seem to be content with complying with the law, whereas communities want to use HEAL to jumpstart the environmental justice work, and we want agencies to go above and beyond what is written in the letter of the law. And then finally, cross-coordination is still needed within and among agencies. And this is really exemplified by the fact that a lot of these agencies are now establishing committees or work groups that are focused on integrating environmental justice within their agency work. However, there's not a whole lot of communication between the work groups and those committees. And so there is a lot of duplication of efforts and really can be exploitative of community members' time and energy. And then there's also, while the interagency work group is a space for agencies to collaborate on HEAL deliverables, the agencies themselves are also, doing their own thing and do tend to work in silos. And so this is where a lot of the repetitive community engagement occurs, and there's not as much progress being made across the state as a whole. So those are like the main findings that we really touch on in the report. Again, if you are interested in reading more about the assessment, please read our report that is out on our website. And then I'll go over some of the recommendations that we provide for agencies. And these really do tie into the key findings that we shared. So engaging community members early and intentionally is paramount to really seeing the spirit of HEAL Act embodied within agency activities. And so, many of our recommendations do center around increasing community involvement and influence in these decision-making spaces, not just starting public comment periods and things like that. We also want agencies to use discretion to set up HEAL for success. And so that looks like leveraging HEAL to realize the spirit of the law by, for example, with an environmental justice assessment. If the assessment finds that the action crosses a certain threshold of likely harms on frontline communities, we want to see agencies develop policies around forgoing certain significant agency actions or significantly modifying the action to ensure that frontline communities are protected and that their benefits are maximized. We also want to see some, evaluation and refinement of the roles and governance structures that are playing a role in HEAL implementation. So that includes, making environmental justice and health coordinators position within the governor's role permanent, or governor's office permanent, I'm sorry. And then, having the legislature and the Environmental Justice Council working together to make sure that HEAL is a priority and that they have the ability to really help agencies implement components of the HEAL Act. And then we also do provide recommendations, like I mentioned earlier, about or recommendations for other involved parties. So that includes the Environmental Justice Council and the interagency work groups. We are asking for their meetings and committee meetings to be open to the public, especially frontline communities, so that we are more up to date on how agencies are moving, and we have a better understanding of the thought processes behind a lot of the work that we do see. We also want the governor's office and the legislature to work with the agencies to ensure that they have sufficient funding to really be able to implement and do this work. So those are the main recommendations that we really list out in the report. Again, if you are interested in seeing more about the recommendations and our assessment of each of the 8 HEAL agencies, please review our report that is linked on our website currently. And now I'm going to pass it to Devin, who will discuss findings from our budget analysis.
Thank you, Maiko. I'm Devin Diaz. I'm the Environmental Justice Program Manager with Front Centered. I use he, him pronouns. It is a pleasure to be in community with you today. This slide features findings from our Front Centered 2024 budget analysis, as well as a picture of dozens of environmental and climate justice advocates from the HEAL Capacity Grant statewide convening in August of this year. Our analysis of this year's budget focused specifically on the Climate Commitment Act's funds and where the legislature had met the critical requirement that 35% of dollars are directed towards overburdened communities. After a literal reading of the budgets, we categorized the Climate Commitment Act funded programs into 5 categories: explicit, prioritized, tribal, honorable mentions, and mentions. For example, our explicit category captures budget items explicitly directing all or certain percentages of money to overburdened communities. So if the budget says that of $100 million of a $100 million program, 50% of the money must go towards overburdened communities, we scored that program at $50 million going to community. Our analysis reveals that of the $1.2 billion, again, I'll repeat that, of the $1.2 billion of new Climate Commitment Act fund allocations, only about $186 million, or 14.6%, can reasonably be expected to go to overburdened communities. It is clear that state agencies have a significant gap to address. Please note, if the legislature was vague in their budget language, the administering agency may not be limited by that 40% goal, and in fact may allocate up to 100% of those funds towards community. However, this is not guaranteed, and that's why the Office of Financial Management analysis is different from ours. Their analysis makes assumptions based on budget language and communication with agencies, and assumes that 39.6% will go to overburdened communities. While we are hopeful that the state not only meets but exceeds that 40% goal, this assumed estimates are not legally bound. That means there is no way to hold agencies accountable to the Office of Financial Management's estimates, highlighting the need for explicit language in state budgets. Lastly, as Michael alluded to earlier, the Office of Financial Management will publish agency budget and funding data on their HEAL dashboard on October 15th. And we hope to see agency spending of Climate Commitment Act funds in community exceeds that 40% goal. Slide, please. This slide features a visual representation or tree map of the buckets we created of the Climate Commitment Act funds directed towards overburdened communities. If you add the explicit in light blue, prioritize in orange, tribal in green, and honorable mentions in pink, essentially the right column of the tree map, you would arrive at that 14.6% of Climate Commitment Act funds directed towards overburdened communities in this year's budget. For those interested in a more in-depth look at our methodology and a detailed breakdown, I encourage you to read our budget blog posted on our website or to reach out to me directly, and I'll place my email in the chat shortly. Slide, please. This slide features budget recommendations as well as an additional picture of people at the HEAL Capacity Grants convening earlier this year. Our budget analysis is not just about identifying the shortfalls, but also providing solutions. These recommendations are designed to help agencies comply with the law, but please keep in mind to implement them effectively, we need the involvement of the legislature, the governor's office, agency staff, the Environmental Justice Council, and most importantly, the community. Agencies must create and expand participatory budgeting, community assemblies, and capacity building opportunities, and other programs that create for community identification of needs and priorities. For example, the Department of Health has a participatory budgeting program, also known as Community Budgeting for Decarbonization and Resilience. We are excited to see this $38 million program launch and create change now and into 2025. Additionally, the state should make funding opportunities more accessible to overburdened communities. They could do this by moving away from reimbursement-based grant models and simplifying grant applications and reporting requirements. Agencies must conduct coordinated outreach and engagement efforts. They should avoid duplication or exploitation of communities' time and resources by combining interagency outreach efforts, as well as partnering with other agencies and community-based organizations. Thank you for your time, and let's work together to ensure that the promises of equity and environmental justice are not just words on paper, but realities in the communities that need them the most. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it back to Michael.
Okay, thank you so much, Devin. Now we're going to really get to the meat of the briefing, which is the community panel. Unfortunately, we had someone who could not make it, but we do have two wonderful members that I want to reintroduce. Ione Jones and Camille Gapaya. If you could both introduce yourselves, your name, organization, and the role that you play in your organization. And then we're just gonna start a conversation, a dialogue between all of us and really get to the vision that we have for how HEAL can play a role in exemplifying environmental justice within the state government. So I'm going to start with Ione first, and then I'll go to Camille.
Good afternoon. My name is Ione Jones. I am a lineal descendant of the original peoples of Fishhook Bend, a place where indigenous villages and communities once existed along upper, middle, and lower parts on the Snake River. I am an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of Yakama Nation, specifically as Wawyekma Nachiam Nashwa, the people of the lower Snake River Palouse. I am an independent researcher, cultural programmer, and advocate studying the way modern systems impact Indian country. I conduct much of this work as my role as executive director and co-creator. We are a grassroots Native-led organization. I'd like to pass the mic over to Camille.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm glad to share this space with everyone today. My name is Camille Gipaya. I use she and her pronouns. I'm an immigrant that come from an archipelago, Philippines, where an environment is not a backdrop, but life itself. And that has been kind of the reason why I'm organizing within the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, working inside the advocacy department, where we have different policy focus, understanding that environmental justice is so interconnected on how we live on a day-to-day basis.
Great, thank you both. If you all have questions specifically for this panel, for Ione, Camille, or just about community collaborative governance, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A section, and we will address them. I'm going to first start off with just a broad topic question for both of you to start the conversation. So the first one really is, I would really love for both of you to kind of tell us your experiences and observations in working with state agencies as a community leader and through your community-based organization. And just based on those experiences and observations, what you think needs to change, what you think is, going well. And either one of you can take it.
Hi, Camille. I'll go ahead if you don't mind, begin the discussion. For me, for our organization and what we have experienced through the HEALS Act and getting to know other frontline organizations within the Washington state overburdened communities is being able to learn how we can navigate through some of the communication barriers that we have when there are state or federal benefits available to our communities. We really want to make sure that our communities members understand and recognize benefits that could be lost if we do not include our voices, and if we don't understand, and if we are not engaging in community engagement dialogues. And so one of the ways that we have been able to do this is by connecting with other grassroots organizations in our community to begin addressing at the individual household levels. Because we have recognized that although we would appreciate having large capacity and huge funding, we may not all necessarily have the capacity to get out and do some of the work that we would like to do on a smaller budget. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to invite individuals to discuss, for example, what we're experiencing right now, which is poor air quality. And how do we get to the Department of Health? And how do we get to the other agencies that are engaging in support services where we can assist with overburdened individuals that may be struggling with clean air? They may not be able to go out into the community, but we need to be able to work together to understand the limitations, even just the basic necessities of life, and how we can help the overburdened communities work together and understand that the agencies are here to support, not to work against. And so by being able to work with other individuals within the discussion that surrounds HEALS Act, we're able to learn more on how we can better assist our communities and how we can get them and their concerns into the comment periods, but mainly, how do we come together without the silos? How do we engage in what does heal mean? And I'm very grateful that through some of our cultural and traditional ecological activities, the conversation has been started. But if we can work together to engage some of our youth and the Gen Z, I think HEALS Act would be more beneficial to each of our communities. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, I think similarly with like Ion, and also with the report that did come out, the cross coordination is very much needed among agencies. It seems like the repetition of the recommendations coming from community-based organizations is happening. Similar questions are being asked from state agencies towards community organizations. And so that sharing of information, when it comes to community outreach, like methods, I'm sure that state agencies have that information. But it seems like that state agencies are also working in silos. That's what I've realized, working with them, having these conversations about the HELAC, providing them recommendations about like the planning implementation strategies that they want to move forward with the HELAC. The HELAC, was supposed to kind of create these guidance for state agencies to navigate the process of, creating the environmental justice assessment. Because prior to the HELAC, there was no guidance. There wasn't a structure and that like transparency, that obligation was almost something that was optional. And the HELAC has brought on that responsibility for state agencies. And so what we're hoping is that those process will be more streamlined, not just at the end of that drafting of that assessment or that report or planning, asking community engagement when it's completed already. So we want consistency, community engagement of, that's more intentional and not just so brief with state agencies. That's something that community members are asking. They're demanding it. Community-based organizations have created this network of sharing that information when it comes to communal health, like risks, community engagement. And we really want to see a space where state agencies and community-based organizations could work together at different components of like planning, implementation, to make sure that we're really moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, Camille, but wondering, we talked a lot about how HEAL is the brainchild of frontline communities, across the state, and really would love to hear, at least, based on your interactions with your communities and your community-based organizations, how you envision the HEAL Act really helping advance your local communities' HEAL priorities or environmental justice priorities.
Education is it's a key thing for HEAL Act. There's not a lot of outreach and education that's happening with state agencies as of right now. I'm seeing it as like community-based organizations are responsible for doing that education when it comes to like terminologies, showing them about the environmental health disparity map. I know words like overburdened, frontline communities, vulnerable population, community health impacts. Those are words that are not as familiar with community members, right? They can tell you specifically what their needs are, what is wrong, what solutions they have for those issues. But those terminologies can create kind of that I've been seeing that like members can be intimidated working with state agencies, or they're just unfamiliar that the HEAL Act exists, that you could actually be in spaces and demand to be a part of the decision-making process. And so with the HEAL Act, there's a very much needed outreach for the HEAL Act itself specifically, and what they are doing, for state agencies to be responsible for that outreach, not necessarily just creating that, not entirely relying on community-based organizations to do that work, but also doing environmental justice overall. Like, how does the HEAL Act how is the HEAL Act embedded with environmental justice? How is this actually like moving us forward? And so that would be kind of what I would want to see moving forward, that there's education spaces, even pamphlets, videos, advertisement, radios, discussions that doesn't have to be 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or 2 days, but you know, it could be like a 30-second like clip. We are constantly trying to face with misinformation that's happening with climate crisis, right? But trying to get people's attention, where meeting them where they're at, even if it's like social media, different virus. And so it's that tactic that we need to really like change when it comes to giving community members the information that's so much easier to consume sometimes. They're very busy, right? Like we serve communities that are low income, that are on the working class, that are constantly packed with schedule, you know, trying to figure out childcare, and then insurance, and education with their like children. And so we understand that sometimes you can't go on a town hall meeting. And so I think that community outreach need to kind of change, you know, it needs to be in different forms. Also, we're talking about language, right? Another thing, the language interpretation. And so yeah, I think that needs to kind of like change with HEAL. So I'll pause for like Ion's so thoughts.
Great, Camille. I really want to share and stress that public education is highly critical for our communities, especially because of how adverse we are on the environmental justice map. Some areas we've got individuals that are on the air quality 10 out of 10. We've got communities that could possibly be 8 out of 10. And what I envision for the HEALS Act is interconnecting how the HEAL is supportive to not just the environment, but also to individual community members. And so that individuals understand where they are in the HEAL process within their community. And so if we do have resources available for community, let's say for daycare centers, if they're looking for funding or looking for equipment to assist during our wildland fires, we would like to be able to have that central point of contact that individuals within the state understand how you reach out to the climate crisis that are impacting day-to-day living. And so if the state, federal and these agents would be more available, more consistent, so that there's just one centralized listing for how we interconnect with healing within our communities, that's what I envision. It's been a challenge looking for assistance for our elders that are dealing with our poor air quality. A lot of our families are unable to leave their homes. And although COVID may not be as much of a concern as it was a year ago, it still is one of our environmental issues that we're dealing with. We've got post-harvest spraying within our communities that leads into the air. So our clean air is highly important. Clean water is highly important. And so we want to be able to engage in these type of conversations with state agencies that we can access them immediately. If we know that people have need access to services that is just a part of their day-to-day essentials, we envision having that available, and so that we're not reactatory, so that we're prepared we have a plan, and that we can truly use HEALS Act and interconnect it with everything. Our environment, the voices that we represent, which are the plants, the animals, and our youth. And so if we can engage the HEAL Act and the state agencies to recognize the agents are there for the community, not the community for the agents. We need to reverse the dialogue so that we can enhance that conversation, share templates so that we understand how to properly engage, but also include cultural humility through the HEALS process.
Yeah, and I think like a key thing that I'm seeing with just like community members, they're very discouraged. They're very angry. There's a lot of emotions when it comes to community engagement or just those discussions itself, right? And I don't blame them. Just historical like context for these community members. And so most of the time you have to be very aware of those new ones of those relationships. And so our role as a community engagement as a community organization is not to speak for our community, but also to empower community members to like actually share those spaces, right? I don't necessarily what their lived like their experiences on a day-to-day basis are, right? I can only speak for my experience and the family and friends that I know of. And so the skill set, the spaces, right, that needs to be like shared to kind of listen in and also step back a little bit for community members to like speak. And what like Ione was mentioning that we have so many spaces about asking for community members opinions. And most of the time you may not see community members in those spaces, right? The information about the meetings are not shared efficiently. Sometimes it's kind of like an afterthought for state agencies. And so the key thing is to really empower individuals to be a part of the Environmental Justice Council meetings. I'm part of the Green New Deal Oversight Board in the city of Seattle, making sure that the residents know that it's a space where they could provide public commentary and that the council or the board members are there to listen to what you are saying, right? And like testimonies. The one thing that I really like push for community members is that your lived experience is enough. That in itself is a good it's something that like that has value in it. You do not need a higher education to explain what you are going through, what your families are going through with air quality, clean water, right? Or what you're seeing. And so I think that's hard for like community members, right? To see that you're qualified, your testimony is enough of your lived experience. That has so much more weight than a background in electric vehicle charging station, manager. And so really hoping that community members feel empowered with their lived experience to share that with others, for state agencies, for community-based organizations. I think that's another step also with HEAL Act for people to not only have spaces, but yeah, to just really like share those stories. Like that's a legitimate like data in itself.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Like definitely the need to really come to community, meet them where they're at and their needs is crucial in increasing community involvement in the state agencies and like their activities. But I was wondering if you could touch on, you did already touch on it a little bit, but wondering we're talking about the initial interactions with community members, how we can, how state agencies can improve and how they can actually connect with community members. But once you have connected, with the agencies and you find yourself in agency spaces, how, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences or observations working directly with agencies in those spaces, and like how you think they're doing in ensuring that the community members like you who do have a seat in those spaces are actually able to influence the work that they're doing?
Yes, thank you. I would like to share our interactions with state agencies. I would have to say, at least within the past few months, it has been, I would like to say, pretty much hit and miss. We have individual state agents that are eager and willing to take the time to listen to what true living experiences are and what that means as far as an overburdened community. But we also have state and federal agents that may not feel as vested in the work. And because of that, a lot of what we're CBOs are doing tends to be just another check mark within their compliance boxes. And we do our best to maintain our momentum despite that, because it is a challenge when you have to explain the cultural and traditional ecological living knowledge ancestors have brought, that have provided the programming that the state and federal agents operate under. And to be able to explain the purpose, the intentions, and the history for the stewardship of the original people and persons within the communities is still a challenge. There are times when a conversation is being held in regards to tribal inherent rights. And because Washington State has multiple jurisdictions within the bounds, it's important for state and federal agents to understand the benefits in which are being dispersed within the communities. And so for me, it has been truly a mixed relationship and a mixed dialogue with state and federal agents. And I truly hope that the more that we create these spaces, and so that we can learn what cultural and traditional ecological knowledge has provided the state and federal projects, I feel that we're going to have the communication barriers. But if we can identify and learn how to use the reporting that has been provided, that the science has supported, the reporting's there. If we can begin to learn how to be prepared together as communities rather than reactatory, then our funding within the HEALS, Just Transition, Capital, and Operating for state may begin to look like it's being equally shared amongst the first obligations of the ones most impacted by overdevelopments, like the lower Snake River dams. But I really wish that the state agents and the federal agents would review the information that's being submitted and requesting the funds to be shared within our state, and recognize where the capacity is and where it is not, and just truly follow the first people's knowledge systems and how to steward the lands and to help communities thrive. And so for us, I'm hoping that as these conversations grow, we're going to begin to learn how to target the youth. We're going to learn how to begin to address Gen Z, because all of the work that we're doing now is great, but until we have truly brought in voting between 18 to 25, we have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
I think similarly with Ione, our interaction with state agencies, with the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, have been lacking, where I would say kind of like repetitive. It seems like we're constantly starting the relationship over and over again in the spurts of, when they reach out, you have that span of like 2 months of coordination, and then you're left with silence for like 6 months, and then once again they reach out to you. And so it's lacking in that sense where you're continually, that relationship building is non-existent. And so I acknowledge that there are individuals within the state agencies that are so eager and so passionate when it comes to community engagement. Like, I have met those people within those state agencies, but unfortunately, the state agencies as a whole may not invest in this relationship building. They're not providing the tools, the resources, the time for these individuals that are within these state agencies, what they need, right? That needs to be supported as a whole, as a state agency, right? Not just putting one individual to figure it out. Because if one individual is just doing it for the state agency, it's not going to work. You're working in silos once again. And so really, and so yeah, I think that's kind of like the reasoning that I'm seeing. Like, you have one individual that is reaching out just because of their interests. Just, they feel responsible as an individual to be doing that work. And so I acknowledge that there's that difficulty, right? The HEAL Act was supposed to provide almost like a guidepost of how that process should be. But unfortunately, I don't think that's implemented, or that process is still kind of somewhat unknown for the state agencies. And so that guidance seems to be like, it's still non-existent because they're figuring it out, And so what I would recommend, because I know like there are community-based organizations in this kind of like call right now, that are wanting to be a part of the HEAL Act, wanting to kind of be a part of that work, holding state agencies accountable, just reach out to them directly. I feel like they're more than willing to talk to you about their plan, right? And also hold them accountable. Send an email to them, right? I think what I've learned is not to wait until they send me that invite, unfortunately, right? Just send them directly, go on their contact inbox, and put your name if like you're interested in discussing the HEAL Act. I think that's the strategy that I've gone through. If they're not doing that accountability portion or that transparency as a state agency, it's gonna come from like us as a community member. That is our role also. And so yeah, highly recommend people to just like spam them, asking them, what is your plan? And then have those conversations with them. And so once you start pushing, giving that stress on like the state agency to provide you a list, to send you documents, to send you flyers, or whatever community engagement plan that they have. And so that's also another like level that comes with like community organizing, to hold them accountable, to make sure that they're actually doing the work. And that's what Front and Centered is also there for, right? Front and Centered has been doing that work as a coalition. They represent so many organization, as a whole, which makes our voice so much like stronger, that this is not just one individual or 30 people or so, but it's statewide, not just in Seattle, but statewide all the way to like Spokane. And so, yeah.
Ion, did you have something? You good?
I just wanted to thank Camille for her responses. I really appreciated how she followed up. Thank you, Camille.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Like the insights that you have shared with us have really been really helpful. I hope it's helpful to the agencies who and the reps who are, in attendance currently and who will read our report or view this briefing at a later time. I did have other questions, but we are running short on time. So I'm going to close out our panel. And thank you both again so much for being here and really just sharing your thoughts with us. Really been, I feel very inspired by just hearing both of you. But yeah, thank you both again. There were a lot of questions that I would love to answer, but we could not get to. So like we said earlier, we are going to be answering these after the briefing, and we'll send it out so that you all have the responses. So yeah, thank you both so much. And I'm just going to pass it to Devin to close us out.
Thank you, Maiko. Let's give a round of, let's try to voice our appreciation in the chat for our panelists. Try to think of how could we do that. Camille, Ione, thank you for sharing your story, your truth, how HEAL and that act impacts your communities and communities across the state. Again, thank you for your comments. I'd like to thank Maiko, as well as our Spanish translator, Fanny and Isabel and James, and all the people within Front Center for making this virtual briefing possible. Really like to thank the coalition members across the state of Washington. Really couldn't do this without you and all of your participation within our work groups and creating our policy platforms and giving us the tools and working in concert with you to advocate for environmental and climate justice across the state. As Maiko mentioned, we will be emailing out a recording of this briefing and it will also be available on our website. And in addition to the briefing on our website and the progress report, there was a lot of questions around identifying overburdened communities and the state's process for that. We do have a blog about the overburden identification process on our website as well. And we also received a lot of questions around the budget methodology and some of the gaps that exist between our analysis and the Office of Financial Management's. And again, the blog on our website goes into greater depth on how we arrived at our numbers. And lastly, if you want to reach out to myself or anyone on the Front Center team or some of our coalition members, feel free to contact us. I did put my email in the chat. And again, just really appreciate everyone's time and energy today. Thank you.